Economics sounds like something you can learn to earn buttloads of money in this capitalist world, right? Well, no, but technically, yes. Unless you work for the government in a well-paid position that can enact policies or own a business, which you have to observe the consequences of particular policies to decide what decisions can make your company profit maximum. Or else, after studying the subject, you will most likely be the homeless one who works at McDonald's and often criticize policies made by the government while holding your iPhone 7. Consumers want to pay less while the suppliers want to earn more. Yeah, that's it. Well, right, the graphs. Not those, but this. The demand curve indicates the relationship between price and quantity demanded. By the way, not the demand itself. Quantity demanded and demand are different things. Economics 101, demand means the whole curve, and the quantity demanded means a point lies within the curve. Yeah, so back to the curve, the logic is absolutely simple. Imagine you have to buy an apple for $100 million. Absurd, right? Nobody would consider buying it unless probably, and maybe if it's a golden one. But let's say you can buy an apple for $1, it seems more reasonable, right? Well, people will think the same. So will people all buy apples when it's $1? No. Actually, demand reflects people's willingness and ability to buy specific item. While some people might be interested in buying apples, some don't. But overall, more people will likely buy apples when it's $1, but not whatever dollar. What can we get from this information, you may ask? A demand curve. As for the supply curve, it uses the same logic, but we gotta stand in the supplier's perspective. If you had a valuable game item to sell, let's say the one you grinded for months, how much would you sell, like, rationally? As high as possible. No one is rational when it comes to making money, yeah? What can you get based on this logic? A supply curve. And please remember that supply and quantity supplied are different things. Oh yeah, when there are non-price factors like people anticipating rice would go up in price or something became popular after an advertisement, the current demand would rise, vice versa. Same for the supply. People are maxing, money maxing, maximizers. And we, they are all decision makers. However, when you decide to do something, you must give up something. As things in this round globe are scarce. For example, remember that day you decided to go for a Starbucks coffee for $5 instead of donating it to poor children in Africa. If you have a heart with kindness, which I don't, paying $5 for Starbucks, donating $5 to someone in need, or throwing $5 in the trash bin will be your options. Let's say you only have $5 and the first option is prioritized and the third option is least prioritized. When you choose the first one, the rest are all given up. The reason why you can't simply choose all of them is that you're broke. And the best alternative opportunity, which is your second option, became the opportunity cost. All the options besides the best alternative opportunity do not contribute to the opportunity cost unless they surpass the value of the best alternative opportunity and overtake it. Otherwise, the value changes in those options will not affect the OP, the opportunity cost. Right. Also, relative price. Let's say there are two bottles of cola with different sizes. $5 for the 330mm one, which is the smaller one, and $15 for the 550mm one, which is the bigger one. So every millimeter for the smaller one costs 5 divided by 330, which is $0.015 per millimeter. And every millimeter for the bigger one costs 15 divided by 550, which is 0.027 per millimeter. Relatively, the smaller one is cheaper, obviously. Yeah, we have goods. The morning coffee, a type of goods. The textbooks that you had never read, a type of goods. The employees, Well, I will talk about that later. There are plenty types of goods: free goods and economic goods, capital goods and consumer goods. Free goods are free. No, for real. Free goods are abundant, and you don't have to give up something in order to obtain them, which means no opportunity cost. Nevertheless, for economic goods, it's vice versa. To produce and obtain economic goods, there must be factor costs and opportunity costs also. Yeah. Despite being named economic goods, services are also included. So the employees are not goods, but factor costs. It's not human trafficking. Or is it? Capital goods are the things that make something possible. Basically, things to produce something. Goods that are used to produce other goods that are brought by customers. I mean, consumers. Consumer goods basically are things you buy. Goods brought and used by consumers rather than manufacturers for producing other goods. Hey, remember when I said no one is rational when it comes to making money? Yes, people are forced to be rational by the market. That's why you wouldn't see people selling whatever dollars for an apple, unless I will talk about it later. So I've mentioned a bunch of costs. What I want to convey is that everything comes with a cost. So when people try to maximize the benefits, they tend to put their actions to a cost-benefit balance. That's equilibrium. Actually, when MB, which is the marginal benefit, equal to MC, which is the marginal cost, where marginal benefit means the maximum amount of money people would pay for an additional item. Let's say more people would pay for a loaf of bread when it is $10 instead of $15. Marginal cost mean how much people would pay for the cost added to produce an additional item. The marginal benefit graph is easy to understand. Similar to the demand curve, the higher the price, the fewer people are willing to purchase a specific item. However, the marginal cost graph describes the situation a little tiny bit differently. In short term, every production of an additional item incurs a variable cost. It could be labor, materials, etc., along with fixed costs. Hold on, let me explain what's the difference between a variable cost and fixed cost. Variable costs are changeable, while fixed costs are not. Sort of. Yeah, that's basically it. Okay, back to the topic. So the graph indicates how much the supplier has to pour into the production process for another item. Therefore, you see it is increasing gradually as the production scales. But remember, fixed costs are not included in the marginal cost for a conspicuous reason. They are unchanged, which means they will be at the same level in production, making it unnecessary to include them in MC, which is the marginal cost. However, that only happens when it is in the short term. Introducing the law of diminishing marginal returns. Using the concept of MC, now I can explain what is the law of diminishing marginal returns. Sounds difficult, but it is actually something really simple. In the short term, the more you put in, the less you get after a tipping point. Just imagine when you're grinding in the gym, the more you train, you will expect the more buffed you would expect to be, right? No, here's the catch. Actually, excessive training will make your muscles unhealthy as they will be all burned out. Just like me constructing this video while there is an examination ahead, the same logic applies to manufacturing an item. The more you put in after a particular production level, the efficiency diminishes. In the long term, which means our production costs are variable, we have economics of scale. Two parts, internal and external. Internal economics of scale means that when the company grows big, it can then reap the benefit, like it can pay a lower price for the raw materials from mass purchase, or it can borrow money from the bank at a lower interest rate. External economics of scale mean that when an industry is well developed, the companies can enjoy better infrastructure, market, for etc. They mentioned that when a company wants to maximize profit, the marginal cost must be the same as the price. Well, precisely, the marginal cost has to be as same as the marginal revenue and the price to attain profit maximizing. It is simply because the point is in equilibrium. After that, we have consumer surplus and producer surplus. Okay. Briefly, they measure the internal economic benefit gained by the consumers and the producers. The upper part is the consumer surplus, indicating how much the consumers are willing to pay compared to the market price to purchase a specific item. The lower part is producer surplus, indicating how much the producers are willing to sell compared to the market price when producing a specific item. So, did you notice the consumer surplus is talking about some consumers who are originally willing to pay a higher price but find out that the market price is actually lower. The producer surplus is talking about some producers who are originally willing to sell lower price but find out that the market price is actually higher. Okay, let's go back to the market. As I mentioned, equilibrium, it is the most beautiful thing you can see in a market, unless policies are effective in twisting the market to what the governor wants. Nevertheless, it is inefficient to the market itself. Speaking of that, let me introduce the types of economics first. A traditional economy follows tradition. A market economy follows flow of sellers and buyers. A command economy follows the government. A mixed economy means all I mentioned above combined. It's a matter of which one has a stronger influence on the market. Back to the topic. Several policies could affect the market. Tariff, subsidy, quota, price floor, and price selling. A tariff is basically when the government taxes imported goods as a source of tax income or a tool to compete. When it occurs, the supply of that particular item would drop. To explain that, exporters would tend to sell fewer goods to a country if the cost rises. It makes the particular goods relatively valuable, causing a surge in price. A subsidy is when the government wants to produce the local suppliers. A subsidy is when the government wants to protect the local suppliers from overseas competition, technically pay to win. First, the government pays the local suppliers, making them willing to make more of a particular item, pushing the supply up. Then, the price reduces. A quota is when the government wants to stop importing so much that the market initially wants. The effect of a quota is similar to a tariff, but without the tax income. As the goods from the imports reduce, the particular item becomes more valuable and the price surges. An effective price floor is placed on top of the equilibrium, and the producers can't price a particular item lower than that, mostly used in wages, like minimum wage. An effective price selling is placed lower than the equilibrium, and the producers can't price a particular item higher than that, mostly used when a particular item is priced way too high, like a 100,000 golden apple. If you were careful enough, you would notice there is a shading area in every single graph. That's the dead weight loss. As I said, MC equal to MB means the equilibrium state of the market. But with the government's intervention, sometimes marginal cost is bigger than the marginal benefit, sometimes smaller. It makes the total surplus smaller and eventually reduces the efficiency of the market. Then, behold, there we have the consumer tax burden and the producer tax burden. The benefit of the consumer, and the benefit of the producer. Here's how they work. When an item is taxed, consumers have to pay the increased price, and the producers earn less. When the government adds a subsidy to an item, consumers pay less, and the producers get the money from the government. You may ask, which side is paying more? I mean, which side is like paying more or having a more severe burden? The answer is it depends. Here we go. Demand and supply elasticity. When the demand curve or supply curve lies down, it actually means the elasticity is infinite. But when the demand curve or supply curve is standing right up, it means they're sleeping. So when the curve is horizontal, it means people in the particular market take the price seriously. Whenever the price is changed, they stop buying. When the curve is vertical, it means people in the particular market are quite chill with the price. When I say quite chill, it was freezing chill. They simply don't care about the price and buy the same amount at every price level. However, it wouldn't be that extreme in the real market. If the curve is closer to horizontal, it is considered high elasticity, and if the curve is closer to vertical, it is considered low elasticity. It applies to both demand and supply. There's a special case called elasticity equal to 1, where the price changes are equal to the quantity changes. And here's the formula. But who cares? Yeah. If you think that's all, here we go again, introducing several types of demand and supply. Competitive demand, Xbox and PlayStation. Composite demand is when an item can be used to make multiple items. Think about gold. You can make a golden pickaxe, a golden sword, a golden... Okay, I will stop that. Yeah, you get the idea. And when an item increases in its demand, which makes the price rise, the supply of another item that is made by the same raw material drops. Joint demand is when two items can be used together. Their demand will increase or decrease together. Diverted demand. The demand for the input is driven by the output, like the demand for paper is driven by books. Competitive supply, alternatives. Joint supply, same idea as joint demand. Okay, now let's talk about the economic activities. Very simple: primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. Accordingly, raw materials, manufacturing, services, and high intellectual production. I've talked about goods, and surprise, surprise, there are actually more types of goods. Inferior goods, something people buy when they're broke. Normal goods, something people buy when they have sufficient money. Luxury goods, something people buy when they have a high income. Finally, before we get into microeconomics, let's talk about external benefits and costs. The funny thing is, an action can cost both. Think about when you walk into a restaurant, order some food, and take a couple of pictures for your 50 followers Instagram page. The good impact on the restaurant would be that it becomes more popular after you shared it. Perhaps. The negative impact, however, would be that your posts might reveal the design of the food to other restaurants so they can, simply yoink the design. And you probably won't pay the restaurant, or the restaurant probably won't pay you for what you have done, which means no compensation. That is basically the concept of external benefits and costs. Let's hop into macroeconomics. First of all, types of markets. Perfect competition. Companies are selling something same with the same price. Monopolistic competition. Companies are selling something different. Oligopoly. Companies are selling something different, but with a few large sellers. Monopoly. The market is mine. Basically, the company can do whatever it wants. Remember what I said. That's why you wouldn't see people selling 100 million for an apple unless the company is currently monopolizing the market, which means it can price a specific item as expensive as it wants. That's why the government and the consumers wouldn't be happy to see that, and that's why there is such a thing called anti-monopolization whatever law. Yeah. And then we have gross domestic product, GDP. It consists of C, I, G, and NX. C stands for consumption, what people in the economy are paying for, especially for the goods or services. I stands for investments. No, I'm not talking about stocks and bonds, but something tangible like buildings and infrastructure. G stands for government spending, like military and education. NX stands for net export, basically export minus import. By the way, do you think the government's payment for the unemployed allowance is considered in the GDP? Yes? Oh, you're wrong. Yeah, money is transferred without any production is considered a transfer payment, but it's not included in the GDP. Now, time for the price level, inflation, and deflation. Price level is to measure the average price of the goods in an economy. When the price level goes up, that's inflation. When the price level goes down, that's deflation. Here I am to explain why it happens. Let's say there is an oversimplified economy with 3 people selling things to each other. Person A sells apples, person B sells oranges, and person C sells bananas. Every day, person A consumes a banana, person B consumes an apple, and person C consumes an orange. The price of every fruit is 1 unit. If the price remains unchanged, the economy will stay the same for the next 100 years, and nobody will consume more than that. However, if person B wants to eat 2 apples, he has to either sell 2 oranges or increase the price of an orange by a unit. Since person A only wants 1 orange, person B has no choice but to increase the price. Now person A has to increase the price of an apple to 2 units in order to afford an orange. There we go, an inflation cycle. It makes someone lose in a short cycle and benefits somebody. When we take the concept to the real market, we will realize that's how it kind of works. An economy will normally go up and down. The 4 states are expansion, peak, contraction, and trough. If you are one of those who think the idea that banks are totally just a sort of scam, congratulations! Let me explain to you how banks work. There are 3 things to make the system work: reserve, deposit, and loan. First, the banks keep a portion of the money, so when people withdraw, it has a stable money foundation to pay the people to prevent the banks from collapsing. That's reserve. There are 2 types of reserve: required reserves and excessive reserves. If the public finds out that they can't withdraw money from the bank, it would cause a chain reaction where more withdrawals occur because of the fear that the money will vanish. It is lethal to the economy, causing the country's instability, and it would be terrible for the government. Therefore, required reserves are set by the government to prevent bank failures. After the amount of reserves obtained, what the government required, the banks can basically do whatever they want. Then the banks loan the money out with interest rates. After that, the money goes back to the bank as people save it. After a few cycles, the bank generates money, and that's how banks make money for you. Technically for themselves, yeah. However, there are 3 presumptions to make the whole process possible. The loaned cash will be saved in banks. There is sufficient loan demand. There are no excess reserves. Then we have the government enacting fiscal and monetary policies to stabilize the economy, or simply trying to get more income for the people. Yeah. Fiscal policy include increasing taxes, subsidies, setting the minimum wage, etc. It mostly affects the GDP. Monetary policies include moving the money supply, open market operations such as buying government bonds, modifying the reserve requirements rate, and changing the discount rate, which is the interest rate between banks when banks are borrowing money, etc. Okay, currencies. In a nutshell, a stronger currency is typically bad for exports, and a weaker currency is typically good for exports, as your goods and services are relatively cheaper when your currency is not that expensive to exchange in comparison. For example, if the currency exchange rate is $1 to 150 yen, to buy something in Japan from America, you must exchange your dollar to Japanese currency. Let's say, for 90,000 yen worth of goods, you have to pay $600. But when the exchange rate dropped to $1 to 300 yen, in which US dollar is stronger as $1 can now exchange more yen. To buy something worth 90,000 yen, you now only have to pay $300. Let me drop something big before the end of the video. Hyperinflation. This is what I wrote months ago when I was researching the phenomenon. In an oversimplified economy, the source of expense will always be the source of income. At this point, no gain or loss. However, when an anticipation of the price change occurs, a particular seller in the market will tend to increase its price to cope with the outcome of what has been predicted. The other goods or services providers will then also have to increase the price of goods and services to cope with such a sudden change in terms of expenses. Hyperinflation appears when the cycle of anticipation starts to get out of hand and the market starts to price items hyperinflatingly. My economics examination is in 3 days while I'm constructing this video. So I want to make a video about economics while studying and reviewing what I've done and learned at the same time. And I have to keep this video sort of as short as possible. And there are still topics that I haven't covered because I don't have a lot of time to make it. So sorry if you want to learn something seriously in this video. I mean, most of you clicked into this video for the jokes, right?